Welcome back to Living in Spokane, Washington. Today we're covering the fourth part of our first-time homebuyer series, How to Fix a Bad Financial Situation. This video series covers all the basics to help you get on the right path towards owning a home, no matter where you are in the process. In previous videos, we've already talked about how to set up a strong financial foundation, how to save for later, and a deep dive into credit. Today, we'll talk about how to get back on track from a variety of financial issues. To round out this series, be on the lookout for the last video in the series, which will cover what the home buying process looks like. Be sure to stay to the end of the video to get all the information you need to start your financial journey out right. Welcome back to Living in Spokane, Washington. If you're new here, my name's Hunter McKay, and I'm your local real estate broker. Whether you're moving to the area or just want to learn more about how to prepare for buying your first home, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Feel free to reach out. Before we begin, I want to emphasize that the information provided in this series is intended for education and entertainment purposes only. I'm a really great real estate broker, but I am not a financial advisor, and it's important to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional to tailor any recommendations to your specific situation. So please reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to give you a recommendation on who you can speak with. So how do we get out of a bad financial situation? Unfortunately, the answer is really pretty simple, but it's not easy to do. You just have to stop avoiding it. Take the bull by the horns. Most of us, are in the financial situations we're in either because we planned or because we didn't plan. And so if it's a bad financial situation, guess which category you're in. You didn't plan, and it's time to start. One of the first things we have to adjust is our mental ideas around money, whether or not we deserve it, whether we have enough of it, where it's going to come from, and frankly, what we're going to spend it on. A lot of us do have things in our budget that if we're financially out of whack, we quite simply don't deserve. I'm currently restructuring my budget, paying down some debt, and I'm having to look myself squarely in the face and say, you spend a lot of money on Amazon. Probably on things that you do not need, or at the very least do not need at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. So you probably should put the phone away when you're binge shopping and recognize that if you have debt, pay it off. In American society, we've all gotten really used to saying, well, I'll pay it off later, I can afford the payment. But how much is that compounded payment in interest if you were to put it into a savings account or a 401k or a house? It's a big number. Go do the math. One of the worst things that can happen from a terrible financial situation is bankruptcy. That's kind of like the I finally give up, I don't know what else to do, I'm not going to be able to fix this myself. And so you file bankruptcy. If you've seen The Office, this is not like when Michael Scott walks out and goes, I declare bankruptcy. It's actually very challenging. It's expensive. And you get put on a very strict budget because the government and other people who are owed money by you would like to know why you're not paying it. And if you can't prove why, then you don't just get to run around saying I'm bankrupt. It's even going to get harder as the laws get more aggressive for people who own their own homes. And so be on the lookout for bankruptcy laws changing throughout the next 2 to 5 years. And just understand that it's not a good thing. It will hold you back from buying houses, buying cars. It will hold you back from having a good credit score, which will lead to many other terrible things in life, as you're probably already experiencing if you're covering this video. One of the first action steps that we can take towards fixing a bad situation, after we've fixed our mental attitude, after we've said, okay, I've cut all of my budgets back to normal, I'm not binge shopping anymore, how am I going to fix the first really broken thing that's negatively affecting me? The goal here is really to have a great credit score when all of this is said and done, and to not have any debt or collections. So let's start with the worst thing that's affecting both. Bad debt that has already gone to collections. This is medical bills, judgments, utilities, anything that you were supposed to pay originally and didn't pay. You got to go find them. If they're still coming after you, make a whole list and chunk them out from the most expensive and highest interest rate all the way down through the lowest. And the big tip with collections, don't just pay the collection bill to the collection company. Call the original company who you owe money to. Let them know that you're in collections with this collection company servicing a debt that you owe them. Make sure you reach out to them and see if they will settle for less money than they're currently owed, because it costs them money to use that collection company, and they have the ability to recall that debt and just take a settlement from you. So take the extra couple of hours to call each of the debt collectors individually and see if they will settle with you for an amount of money. See if they'll put you on a new payment plan and then make that payment plan. But ultimately, if it's stuck in collections and they won't deal with you, You gotta pay the collections. It's not just gonna go away. Technically speaking, you could ignore everything for 10 years and be perfect over that decade. Then everything will fall off. But do you really want to put your life on hold for 10 years just because you didn't pay one bill? Now that we've covered a little bit on how to get through collections, what do we do when we have bad credit? Or, in some cases, no credit, which can be just as terrible when you're trying to buy a home. Let's start with non-existent credit. If you're maybe a person who's paid cash for everything your whole life, maybe you're not in a bad financial situation. Maybe you actually have plenty of savings, a good job, but you've never bought anything on credit. You don't have a credit card, you don't have a car loan. The house purchase is actually going to be really challenging because when someone pulls your credit score, you're not going to have one. And unfortunately, that is as damaging to moving forward in underwriting as having a bad score. Either way, the credit score requirements are present. And so most home loans are best when you can have a credit score above 700. If you're between 620 and 680, that can still be beneficial. If you're below 620, you're generally going to get hit with rate increases and high risk penalties, but you can still get home loans in certain circumstances. They're just more expensive. So if you don't have credit, the easiest way to fix that is to go get a credit card. Go apply for a credit card to Discover or Macy's or Costco. It really doesn't matter. You just have to get credit from someone. If you can't get credit, because sometimes they'll say, wow, we actually don't want to be the first company that takes a risk on you, you can go to any bank or credit union and get a secured credit card. You'll essentially put up $500 or $1,000 in a secure account that you don't have access to, and that will anchor a credit card that they give you. You'll still have to pay it off and use it like a credit card, but it will be a little bit easier for you to get approved for it and can immediately start building your credit. But Hunter, I have plenty of credit cards. I've defaulted on a few of them, and I might have forgotten to pay a utility bill at a past apartment complex. I don't really remember. My credit score is 440. I'm afraid to look. This is not a made-up story. This is a real story. Unfortunately, if you've had an interesting run of life and no one taught you how to use credit appropriately, you might have made some bad mistakes. It's okay. The fastest way to fix this is start with the highest expense, highest interest rate first. We're going to go with default judgments. If you haven't made payments on something and they've already gone after you in court and you've got defaults, you just have to go pay those first. Those are the most damaging. If you can get those removed completely by calling the original company, just like a collections company can pull it back, so can a default judgment, if it hasn't been recorded against you yet. But if they've already sued you and you have that default judgment, you just got to pay it. And unfortunately, if it's not paid, it's going to continue to come back and haunt you. I once had a client who married someone, wasn't even their judgment, but they married someone who forgot they had gotten sued. Questionable about the honesty about this one, but we're going to run with it. They forgot that they got a $10,000 judgment from their ex-wife. Cool. Awesome story. You can't buy a house if you owe your ex-wife $10,000 and she's recorded a judgment against you. Title doesn't like that. The lender subsequently doesn't like that. And everyone reports to each other and says, no, sorry, we're not going to let you move forward. So the judgments have to be paid first. And worse than that, the judgments usually are accruing a massive amount of interest. So stop ignoring them, figure it out, go call the person, work out a payment plan immediately. Okay, now let's talk about those people who they're not really sure why they have bad credit. They certainly have paid all their bills on time. Yeah, they have high limits. Yes, they use all of their limits. They've got a lot of credit cards. But why is their credit score so low if they always make all the payments on time? Hot take, if you're making minimums and you're maxed out on your debt load, everyone's scared of you. You're like this crazy person running around on the knife's edge with zero capacity to fix a bad thing that happens, and you've already used all of your emergency money. And so everyone's like, oh shit, what if something happens to this person? It's going to be bad. And so your credit score continues to go down if your utilization limits are above certain levels. Every single one of your credit cards or loans is going to have a utilization limit where they're comfortable with it. If you have a $10,000 credit card, you probably can put $5,000 on it before the company is going to get uncomfortable and start downgrading your credit score. And so if you're at 90% utilization or 95% utilization on all of your cards, it doesn't matter that you're making the minimum payments. You're still going to have a pretty terrible credit score. Probably acceptable to buy a home, but it's going to be really expensive. And so just pay your cards down to like 20 to 30%. If they're below 30% of maximum balance, that's going to be the best amount of money to record a really good score. If you can keep it below 15%, that's even better, but I recognize that that can be challenging given how expensive, being alive is today. But Hunter, I don't want to pay it. Can I just ignore it? Will it go away? Yes. Over 10 years. I had a client who lost her ass in 2008, like really bad, total meltdown, and carried somewhere on the order of $2 million in liens, judgments, etc. The hope of paying them was negligible. And she was like, what if I just ignore it? Can I continue just moving along? It's tough because her life went from owning a home to renting a home and owning a much smaller car that she could pay off with a much higher interest rate because everything was more expensive. She had terrible credit for many years, but she didn't pay the $2 million. She didn't have it, and she was never going to. All of her money went to living life for the next decade. She rebuilt, and she's fine now, and she did totally ignore the $2 million. But over that 10 years, she had very limited access to credit cards. All of her car loans were always really expensive. She couldn't buy a house. She had to rent. And so all of the things that we talk about building towards a safe and stable financial future were prohibited from her during that 10-year period until the liens expired. Finally, they expired, and on year 11, she gets to start really rebuilding. But if it takes you less than 10 years to fix the problems that you're asking, Hunter, can I ignore them? Then the answer is you can, but why? Go fix them if it takes less than 10 years. I want to be really clear. Just because you can do something does not mean you should. The losses experienced by this woman by not taking additional action to settle or mitigate the damage that she just sat under for a decade is unrecognizable. I don't really know how to calculate the amount of monetary loss that is present in that decade of inaction. And so, is it possible? Sure. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video. Obviously, financial situations are always really unique and important to understand. So if any of your questions weren't answered in this video, please feel free to reach out for a private consultation and we can help you get on the right track.